Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English Pod. My name is Marco.
And my name is Catherine. So, Marco, what are we talking about here today?
Today, we're going shopping again.
We go shopping a lot here in English Pod, but this is an upper intermediate level lesson,
Right.
so we've got some very specific terminology to cover.
Exactly. We're going shopping for a digital camera, so we're going to be talking about very specific, maybe a little bit technical vocab related to this very fascinating and expensive product.
All right, I'm very excited. I recently purchased a camera, but we won't talk about that yet. Let's take a listen to the dialogue for the first time, and when we come back, we can talk about some of the really interesting details.
Hello, ma'am. Can I help you find something?
Yes, actually, I'm looking to buy a camera.
We've got a wide selection. Do you know if you'd like a point and shoot or something a little fancier? Are you shopping for yourself or for someone else?
Actually, I'm buying a camera for my husband.
Ah, well then I'd recommend a nice entry-level digital SLR.
Yeah? Can I take a look at the SLRs you carry?
Sure thing, follow me. This here is
The Canon EOS. Yeah, it's okay, but I'm looking for something that performs better in low light, has a better display panel, and longer battery life.
The Nikon D60 is a nice option.
Yeah, but what kit lens does this camera come with? I don't want some bulky telephoto lens.
Well, this one has the,
Looks to me like an 18 to 55mm lens. Pretty standard. That'll do. Not like my husband will be stalking celebrities or anything.
can I interest you in any
Accessories? Do you carry polarizing filters?
polarizing filters? We should. I'm sorry, ma'am. Looks like we're sold out.
No, you're not. There are some right here.
Oh, well, would you look at that? Polarized.
Like I said, but there are some very important words that anyone who wants to buy a camera should know before they go into the store. And these are common across the board. So let's take a look at these in today's language takeaway.
Language takeaway.
All right, so in language takeaway today, we have our first difference. Now, it's very important to know the difference between point-and-shoot camera and the digital SLR.
Okay, so digital, everyone knows digital now, right?
Right.
That's the kind of photography we have. You don't use film, okay? It uses a memory card to record digital images. But point and shoot are those little cameras where you just click and it takes a picture. There's no lens, there's no additional lens, there's no special add-ons. It's a small rectangle and you just take normal pictures. And that's the kind of camera that like my mom uses. And
Like
that, like,
everyone usually
I have it in
has
my
those.
purse and whatever. It's
Yeah.
just easy to use. But the digital SLR is a kind of camera that's like the old SLR where you have an attachment of you have a body and you have a lens and they're just much fancier and you have to do a lot more on your own to make a nice picture.
Now, SLR, that's an acronym. Do you know what it stands for?
So an SLR is a single lens reflex camera, and that means that there's a lot more you have to do as the photographer
Right.
to make sure that the picture comes out well.
Right, so it's really interesting because you can actually play with the lens, like the focus and, how much light you want to allow it to go in. And there's a lot of really, sometimes a little bit difficult things that not many people understand.
Exactly, and so I think that's why it's good to do some research before you buy one because there's so many differences across the different cameras.
Okay, now both on digital SLRs and on point-and-shoot cameras, you have something that's called a display panel.
That's right. So a display panel is usually covered in plastic, and it's the area that tells you how many pictures you've taken, how many pictures you can take, if the flash is on, if you're doing an automatic setting. So it's like the little computer monitor that tells you what's going on with the camera.
Usually after you take a picture, you can also see how it came out, right, in that moment.
Exactly. And so a lot of times with these fancy cameras, you want to know how big the display panel is, and how good the quality is in the display panel. Because obviously if you take a picture and it shows up bad in the display panel, you want to take a new one. But
Right.
what if it's the display panel that's broken?
Right, right. Okay, very good. And that's actually one of the great advantages of digital cameras, that you can actually see how your picture looks like
Exactly.
in
It's
that moment.
instant gratification.
Nice. All right, now when she was looking to buy this digital SLR, she mentioned something about a kit lens.
Okay, this is fancy camera terminology, right? Because if you buy a point and shoot, there's no lens. It's just the camera. But if you're buying a fancy digital SLR, you can buy the body, which means the machine, but there's no lens. So normally stores will sell cameras with a kit lens. That means they make a kit, or they make a combination for you.
So it's the body and the lens.
Exactly.
But if you want, you can buy the body and the lens separate. Maybe you want a really fancy lens.
Exactly. So what's the kind of fancy lens we might buy?
A telephoto lens.
Ooh, so these are the really big lenses for super close-up shots from a distance, right? So you think of maybe professional photographers or photojournalists who have these kind of lenses. They're big and they're bulky and they're not
Right.
for traveling.
Usually you see them in like sporting events, right? They're on the side of the field and they have these big white, they're usually white lenses on their cameras. So you can actually take a very close picture of the action that's far away.
Exactly. And it's really good for those kind of things where you have action or where you're trying to get close-ups.
And now if one of these accessories that could go well with a telephoto lens or any digital SLR is a polarizing filter.
Okay, so filter is something that takes certain elements out of something else. So we can filter coffee, for example, and it takes the coffee grounds out and leaves the water. But in a camera, a polarizing filter is something we put onto the glass of the lens to change the way that light goes into the lens.
Okay. So in this way, you take a picture maybe of a very sunny day and it will look differently if you didn't have this filter.
Exactly. And you can also have a UV filter, which does similar things with UV rays in the sunlight. And these are just filters or things you put on the camera, and polarizing means that you're splitting up, right, the kind of light that goes in.
Okay, very good. Very technical terms, and but they're very useful, especially if you're looking to buy one of these cameras and you're not very familiar with the terms. But why don't we move on now to some very interesting phrases that we saw in the dialogue on Fluency Builder.
Fluency Builder.
All right, so on Fluency Builder, our first phrase today is entry level. What's an entry level digital SLR?
Okay, well, entry level is something that we can use for any kind of purchase, so any kind of thing that we buy. In the case of a camera, an entry level is not for an expert or professional. It's something for someone who's buying one for the first time.
So like for beginners.
For beginners. So entry level is like entry, beginning, starting. We can have an entry level job where you don't need training or experience, right? An entry level camera where you don't need long experience with fancy cameras.
Or training
Exactly.
to know how to use it. Okay, very good. So that's an entry-level camera, but as you mentioned, we can also use it for the job, an entry-level job position. All right, what about our second phrase?
Okay, so this one goes with the telephoto lens, right? She says, I don't need a telephoto lens. My husband doesn't need a telephoto lens. It's not like he's going to be stalking celebrities.
Okay, so we have this verb here, to stalk.
To stalk, that means to follow someone around.
Okay.
And to look at them and to watch them and to not leave them alone.
Now, she mentioned this because this is a very, very interesting and closely associated topic with photographers. You know, you have the paparazzi who follow celebrities and they have these big telephoto lens so they can take pictures of celebrities without them knowing.
Exactly. And so you imagine someone in a tree with a big telephoto lens taking a photo of someone famous who's, half a mile away. And stalking celebrities is something that's a bad thing, right?
Yeah, it's bad.
But it's
and
very
also
common.
illegal, I think.
And I think it's illegal, yeah.
All right. And what about our last phrase?
Would you look at that?
Well, he said it in a very surprised tone, right? Kind of like he didn't really expect to find the polarizing filters.
Right, so he's embarrassed, okay? Would you look at that means, oh, wow, I'm surprised.
Right.
Right, so it's awkward, right? So you could say, Marco, you got a little bit of food on your shirt. You've had it for like an hour.
Oh my God! Would you look at that? Oh,
That's
the beans
really,
I had
that's really embarrassing. I've got food on my, right?
on my shirt.
So this man who works at the store, he's embarrassed because he didn't know something he should know.
Okay.
And so he says, "Oh, would you look at that? How funny! I didn't see those."
Now we can also maybe use it in a sarcastic tone, right? If I tell somebody, "Can you bring me my glasses that are on the table?" And they're like, "I can't find them. They're not here." And then I find them. Would you look at that? Here they are, right?
On your head the whole time. That's my mom. Would you look at that? I was wearing my glasses the whole time.
All right, very good. So why don't we listen to the dialogue for the last time, and we'll be back to talk about digital SLRs.
Hello, ma'am. Can I help you find something?
Yes, actually, I'm looking to buy a camera.
We've got a wide selection. Do you know if you'd like a point and shoot or something a little fancier? Are you shopping for yourself or for someone else?
Actually, I'm buying a camera for my husband.
Ah, well then I'd recommend a nice entry-level digital SLR.
Yeah? Can I take a look at the SLRs you carry?
Sure thing, follow me. This here is
The Canon EOS. Yeah, it's okay, but I'm looking for something that performs better in low light, has a better display panel, and longer battery life.
The Nikon D60 is a nice option.
Yeah, but what kit lens does this camera come with? I don't want some bulky telephoto lens.
Well, this one has the,
Looks to me like an 18 to 55mm lens. Pretty standard. That'll do. Not like my husband will be stalking celebrities or anything.
can I interest you in any
Accessories? Do you carry polarizing filters?
polarizing filters? We should. I'm sorry, ma'am. Looks like we're sold out.
No, you're not. There are some right here.
Oh, well, would you look at that? Polarizing filters.
Thanks for your help, Ralph.
No problem, ma'am.
All right, we're back. So you mentioned you recently bought a digital SLR camera. How's that working out?
I'm loving it. I have to actually train myself on how to use it because I used to have an old film camera that had it was actually a Nikon as well, and it's different using a digital SLR. There's a lot of things you can do that are very fancy because you actually there's a computer inside essentially. So it's I'm getting used to it. It's fun.
And what about the difference in pictures, like from a point and shoot to a digital SLR? Does it really make a great difference? Are you very happy with it?
There is a big difference, and part of the difference is that you can control every aspect of the photo, okay? So my digital camera was a small little Canon, you know, the little, what are they called? The power shoot? And it took great pictures because, you know, these cameras have amazing pixel quality, right? They have like 7.1 megapixels
Right.
or like 9.1 megapixels. So the quality is really good, but everything looks the same. If I have my digital camera, my digital SLR, I can frame a shot and I can focus on one person but make everyone else blurry.
Yeah.
I can really make more artistic photos, whereas the point and shoot is great for parties and for
Just like everyday stuff.
Everyday stuff, exactly.
Now, what about traveling? You have a dilemma there, right? Because you visit very beautiful places where you would love to take very nice pictures with a digital SLR, but at the same time, the inconvenience of it, because they're pretty big, all of them are pretty big. So where would you go on that? Would you use the point and shoot or the digital SLR?
Well, that's a good question. One of the reasons that I picked the lens that I did is because it's not immense. But I really want to be able to do some like landscape photography, and I travel a lot, so I think it's worthwhile to suck it up and just take the camera because otherwise, why did you buy it, right?
Yeah, that's true. All right, so an interesting topic here on English Pod, and I'm sure a lot of our users travel around, like to take pictures, or maybe are experts on digital photography. So why don't you come to the website englishpod.com? We'll see you there, and until next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. The English Pod Audio Review. Listen to the meaning, then say the vocabulary word.
Any compact, non-SLR camera with non-interchangeable lenses using automatic settings and simplified controls. Generally desired by novices and casual users. Point and shoot. Try to persuade someone to buy, do, or eat something. Interest someone in. A transparent optical device used to converge or diverge transmitted light and to form images. Lens. A camera lens filter used to control the plane of polarization of light entering the lens. Polarizing filter. Simple and appropriate to an inexperienced person. Entry level.
Let's try that faster.
Simple and appropriate to an inexperienced person. Entry level. A camera lens filter used to control the plane of polarization of light entering the lens. Polarizing filter.
Fun fact about me, I love talking to people. I'm curious about other experiences of life, and that's why I love hosting this show. It gives me a reason, an excuse to talk to really interesting people. That desire to know and understand others is empathy. And it isn't just about being nice. Having empathy and putting it into practice, starting with yourself and the people that you interact with, makes you a better designer, a better business owner. And for me, I feel like the most important thing is that it makes you a better human. Michael Ventura is someone who thinks a lot about empathy, but he's not what you would expect. He ran a branding and creative agency for over a decade with a long list of recognizable brands as clients. He consults for Fortune 50 companies and executives, but instead of being a suit in a boardroom, he's talking about empathy and purpose. Michael, I am so honored to have you with us today because driving empathy is a big part of my life, my passion.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, what is empathy and how exactly did it start showing up in your work with brands?
For me, where it began was running a brand and strategy practice. When you go out and you meet clients and you meet their customers and you understand stuff, the tendency at some points is to go back to the studio and shut the door and say, all right, we heard enough. We know best. Let's go design and build this thing. And anytime we did that, our work was less successful than if we took the extra time to go ask those 5 extra questions or to go meet that person that was going to be a little more inconvenient. And so once we started to realize that was important, we said, this needs to become a process. This needs to become something we build a method around and that we do uniformly well across the team. And so that was sort of how this began, probably now close to 18 years ago. Empathy is so often misunderstood. And people talk about seeing the world from someone else's perspective, standing in someone else's shoes. How do we move it beyond standing in someone else's shoes? Because Michael standing in Teresa's shoes is not the same as Teresa standing in Teresa's shoes, right?
Agreed.
All my own bias, all my own lived experience. And so what I might want in a situation you're going through could be different. And so that behavior is called effective empathy with an A. And it's a type of empathy, but it doesn't always get it right because, again, it comes with my bias. The kind of empathy that I focus on is something called cognitive empathy, which I think of as, instead of the golden rule example we just talked about, something that's more like the platinum rule. And what I mean by that is, what do you want in this circumstance and situation? And what is it like for you? And how do I meet you there, as opposed to insert my lived experience into where you are?
Yeah.
And that takes asking questions and slowing down, and often the thing we don't as humans like to do the most, which is change my behavior based on new information. I could learn a lot about you and not change anything about how I interact with you. And so the benefit of empathy only comes when I apply it
until you put it into practice, it's kind of a neutral thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So empathy is obviously going to make all of us kinder to each other. But what does it mean for us as creatives, as humans?
So you can't design for what you don't know, right? It's not just what do I think you might want, which is easy, right? That's lazy empathy. I could sit at my desk and like be given some user persona and say, oh, this person who's this demographic and lives in this place and has this many kids, this is what they probably want. And then I design something for them. Lazy. What is harder but more effective is to get out of your chair or to go make that phone call
And go talk to them.
what do they want? And they will surprise you every time you ask that question. And they will show you that the thing you thought is probably 80% right. Because if you're at a certain point in your career, you've got some good tools in your toolbox. You can make some decisions that feel well informed. But you're not going to get that 100% accuracy until you go and do the hard work.
100%. We can't make tools or create tools that we imagine that our customers and users want. We have to create tools that they do need and want, that serves them, but not what we imagine will serve them.
That's right. Yeah, there are plenty of patents that are collecting dust because some inventor in a room had a harebrained idea that they thought was brilliant, but never actually talked to anybody. And so it solved a problem of one.
Yes, yes.
So somatic empathy is a little bit more, we can dive into that real quick because it's a fun one. And it actually has a lot to do in the design world, particularly in like industrial design and user experience to some degree as well. What is the lived experience of someone else and how can we build that into an experience we're creating? So take, for example, the automotive industry. When you are designing a vehicle, if you're working at, one of the big five, right, there's a whole group that's building clay models of these cars at scale. And those clay models are designed to kind of like see all the curves and all the shapes, but also to understand before they get into bending metal and welding stuff together, what's it like getting in and out of this car if you're 6'5"? What's it like getting in and out of this car if you have a bad knee or you have crutches, right? All of these things might impair your ability to use this vehicle at its maximum. And so somatic empathy is about understanding the physical lived experience of someone else and how do you take that information into a deeper understanding of them.
Michael, I'm curious to know, what does it mean to have empathy for yourself? Because you talk about that it begins with you.
Yeah, it's paradoxical, right? Because when you think about the idea of empathy, we always think about it for someone else. But if you don't understand yourself, you're going to have a really hard time understanding someone else. If you haven't done that work to understand your blind spots, your biases, what are the things that have informed the person you've become? Are you happy with those things? Are there some of those things you're still working through to let go of? And, and we've all got a version of that, right? Whether you've done it with a therapist or you've done it in a ceremony or you've done it somewhere else in your journal, whatever it might be, right? We're all kind of a work in progress. And so when you turn that lens inward and you start to ask those questions of yourself, you increase your ability to empathize with other people who might be going through the same thing. So I'll give you an example. Unfortunately, most of us at this age in our life have lost someone we love, right? And so when someone else around us loses someone we love, it doesn't mean that we think they're going through it the same way we did, but we can empathize with how hard it is because we've been through it ourselves, right? And so in that same vein, where are the ways you can turn that lens inward and learn more about yourself so that when you see it in someone else, it doesn't mean they're having the same experience, but that you can appreciate the complexity of it and you can meet them where they are.
Now, if you're looking at yourself with empathy and seeing yourself a little more clearly, what do you do with that information?
So how do we practice this active self-observation enough where we notice things and we can respond instead of react, right? We've often heard people talk about that. Like if you take that extra beat, if you take that extra breath, if you take an opportunity to really observe before you act, you'll make a more thoughtful choice, right? So when we're out there trying to build better brands or creative or stories, the ability to take a step back once it hits the world and just observe it, right? And to watch it and to see what it does and where it lands and who's excited about it and is this working? And also having, the the conviction to put it out there, but the light grip to let it go if it's not working and to try to shift into something else that might serve you better.
Yeah, I love that answer. So, in thinking about applying empathy to ourselves, was there a time you realized that you didn't understand yourself that ended up being a turning point for you in your life?
Running a studio, you are solving all day, right? Like I am wired as the CEO of that firm for 17 years. Client emails with an issue, solve it, move on to the next problem. Employee walks in and says, hey, I'm having this challenge, solve it, move on, right? Like that's just like you're in that rhythm all day long. And then I would come home, and my wife is an artist and a goldsmith, and she works in a very solitary way. So I come home and she starts telling me about her day. And maybe her day didn't go that well that day. And so I immediately shift into, how do we solve this? What's going on? What's the problem? Where's the root cause? How do we figure it? And we were having this issue for a little while in our relationship. And at some point I realized that through her help and her sort of pointing it out to me, I don't want you to solve this.
Oh my God, I was just going to tell you that as a woman, many of us, we just want to be heard.
And so you said the perfect word, because this is what where we landed was, now we have this shorthand where, do you want to be heard? Do you want help, or do you want a hug?
Yeah.
And just like, which of the three are we going for here? And then I know how to show up better.
I think that is the secret to good relationships, is if they figure out the language and, you know, what you need from the other person. Because like you said, it's not always what you want.
Yeah. And deconditioning ourselves is hard, right? Because if you've been doing that and been getting rewarded for it at your job, you think that just translates to someplace else, and it doesn't always. And I need to be present and thoughtful and in the moment and shift out of that other behavior and shift into this one.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a real curiosity in empathy if you feel there's a natural place for it. I know I think I'm a naturally curious person, and that's why I care so much about empathy.
One of the easiest things to say and hardest things to do is learning how to ask better questions. We're all busy. We're doing a million things in a given day. So for example, we've all sat on a Zoom waiting for that like fourth person to join the call. And so there's three of us there, and we're like, talking about the weekend. And I say, Teresa, how are you? And you say, I'm fine. I just went to the soccer this weekend, or whatever you say, right? Because how are you is a question that we all just default to.
Yeah.
A quick hack for anyone who's listening, you can try this today while you're waiting for that fourth person who's late, and it's always the same fourth person. You know who I'm talking about. You can say, what's it like to be Teresa today? Same benign curiosity, way better answers every time, because it just hits your brain in a different spot. You're a little more curious. You're a little more, you know what? How is Teresa today? It makes you think differently, because you can't go to the place in your brain where you've got that other answer.
Or the standard, I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah. You can't say, what's it like to be Teresa today? Fine. And if so, you're still thinking in a different way, because there's a little layer underneath there that this kind of poked at. Where can you just shake up your rut patterns of questions and repetitive behaviors in order to get to something that's just a little more interesting? People love to be interesting. Very few people want to be interested. And I actually think being interested gets you a lot more information, a lot more understanding, a lot more empathy.
I love it. Thank you for that. So I've watched a lot of your talks, and you always bring in the breath. Like you always ask your audience, take a deep breath. Take 7 seconds. Inhale. Hold it for 7 seconds, and then exhale. But I find that really useful. I do that myself, is to take a pause.
If you're listening right now, hit pause for 7 seconds and actually do it. When's the last time you took a deep breath? When's the last time you stretched? We sit at machines all day long for so many of us, right? Myself included.
Yeah.
And so, like walking the dog is a part of my job at this point, because if I don't get out and go take the dog for a walk, then I'm sitting at the machine longer, right? And sometimes that little 30-minute spin around the block actually gets my brain moving in a different way, come back with a new idea, have some oxygen in my blood again. All that stuff matters. We kind of forget. A lot of us, for many years, especially when we were full-time in offices, treated our bodies basically like Lyfts and Ubers just moving our brains and mouths in and out of conference rooms all day, right? We're just like, all right, now I'm going to move here and talk, and now I'm going to move here and talk, and now we don't even get that movement.
Yes, I know. I sat stationary on Monday, 8 hours straight. Honestly,
Yeah.
I did not even get up. So I hear you and I agree. This question is applicable to my listeners, those who are creatively marketing their businesses through storytelling. How do you start recognizing themes in your life to figure out how to tell your own story?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind for me when you ask that is, what are people responding well to? Because we often, as creatives, put a lot of stuff out there and we don't really know what's going to hit. And so I look for clues all the time. I look for, where did that get a lot of engagement? When did someone were there a lot of comments on that particular post I wrote? Did people share this thing more than that thing? Did clients get really excited when we started talking about this idea? Like, there's data everywhere.
If you look for it. If you look for it.
Yeah, but most of us are like kind of only looking for the data we're looking for. We're like, I want to confirm that my idea is the one that they're going to pick. And so I'm listening and I only hear what I want to hear, right? We've all heard that being told to us at some point. Like, you're only hearing what you want to hear. Sure. How do you open that aperture a bit wider? How do you pay attention to the stuff that's outside of your that's more in your periphery than in your main focus, and see what's happening there? Because people are paying attention, people are looking at things, people are sharing things, people are responding in different ways, and all of that is good information to help you start to orient on a path to get more outcomes that you're looking for.
What advice do you have for busy solopreneurs and creatives, those who are listening to the show, that is a simple, actionable step that they can take today?
So do less better. Think about all of the things that you're trying to do, and do fewer things and just do them better. That was a mantra I gave myself years ago because I got wrapped up in the hustle. If you're not working 12 hours a day and blah, 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 then you're not working hard enough. That is so not the way I thrive. And yet that was what, for a little while, the world was showing me as that's the path to success. And
it was wrong. They were wrong.
It was totally wrong. And maybe some people are wired that way. I don't know. It's not for me. And if it is for you, then, keep going. But for me, doing less better was really important. Learning to say no to the things that sounded interesting, but really weren't going to serve the goal. And what started to happen was the work I did focus on, I was able to go deeper with, and I was able to actually do better work and yield better outcomes because I wasn't spreading myself across 100 different efforts. I got focused on the things that mattered, and I held myself accountable to them.
I think it's very sound advice, and I have heard it from other really successful executives in my past. So I think you have something there for sure. What do you do, though, when you feel everything is important, especially when you're a solopreneur?
So I would encourage people to think about, what are the criteria you're evaluating all of these different pursuits against? And are you using the same criteria for all of them? Because if you say, well, I'm doing this because I want to make money, and I'm doing this because it brings me joy, and I'm doing this because it does something else, it's going to be hard to apples them, right? But if you are able to say, these are my 4 careabouts. I want to, make a certain level of income. I want to be happy with the work I'm doing. I want to see a long-term career path for this work, whatever they are, right? But if you decide what those criteria are, and then you look at all of the things you're doing through those lenses and give them a bit of a score, actually be a little quant about it and say okay, so this opportunity to do this new project with someone, is this only about scratching the itch of making money? Or does this actually also make me really excited and scratch that creative itch too? And does it do this? And does it do this? Great, then go do it because it's hitting all your boxes. And the things that are only ticking one box, hold off on those or back burner them a little bit, because there's probably a couple that tick all your boxes. But if you are not measuring every opportunity by the same criteria, you're never going to know.
And figuring out those boxes is kind of like finding your purpose, right?
I think it's an ingredient. I think it's a big ingredient. When you know what those criteria are, those are huge sort of legs of the table. The table itself is what I would think about as the purpose. It's like what are we putting on top of all of those things? What are we here to actually do? How do you find your careabouts? Because we don't slow it down enough to sometimes ask that question. And so we just do what we need to do to survive. And I don't think having a purpose is a privilege. I think everyone can have a purpose, and slowing down enough to ask yourself those questions is an important step. And if what you decide you're here to do is be the best parent that you can possibly be, and that's all you want to do, that's a lot, and that's amazing, and you should do that. And if it's to be, among the top 2% of the world, then, go get it.
And finding that purpose is a way to give you a clear path forward and to inform your life and career.
I've been doing a lot of research on the idea of purpose over the last year and a half, particularly because as the world has changed in this post-pandemic life, and our work life and our home life got a little more enmeshed because of the remote work, and we're working a lot. And if we can make that work for us and our goals and ambitions, then we feel a little more fulfilled. We feel a little more motivated when we get out of bed in the morning.
How does self-empathy connect to purpose?
This next chapter of work that I'm focusing on is, how do you take that self-empathy and ask yourself, what do you do once you sort of know what you're here to do? How do you hold yourself accountable? How do you measure progress and growth? How do you do the hardest thing, which is say no to the shiny object that seems cool and interesting, but is going to totally derail the path you're on?
What is your purpose, Michael?
The kinds of work I focus on, whether it's through the work with empathy and leadership development, whether it's this purpose work that I've been researching now, the theme for me is helping others move through moments of transformation and change to become better. And if I can do that work and I can leave this life knowing that I helped a couple things nudge a little closer to the direction they want to be, then I think I maybe have done something right.
My last question is, what is one word that will guide you this year?
Grace. I feel like that's one of the things that is particularly missing in a lot of the world these days. Grace for each other, grace for ourselves, grace for slowing things down and doing them the right way. When you take the effort to do something with grace and dignity and poise and carefulness, it's always better, right? So give yourself the grace of that this year.
I love that word. Thanks so much for joining me, Michael.
Thank you.